Okay.
Part two
Part 2.
of Everything You Know Is Wrong. I'm not trying to push the book, it's just an appropriate title, you know. I haven't read it, I just saw the book's cover. But the idea here, there's an interesting picture. So Yeshua rises from the dead, and the letters in the Hebrew alphabet, Pei Zadi. Pei is a mouth, or something that opens. It could be anything that opens. Your eyes open. Pei, though it's regarded, drawn as a mouth, could be your eyes, even though the previous letter is the ayin. And it's like, well, is it eye or is it mouth? It's something that opens. Your understanding can open. Your heart can open. You can open your gates of your property. I mean, anything that opens, a river delta opening to a bay or a sea is also a bay. Zadi is a blossoming. So for the language to come back to life in the consciousness of his people is certainly a Pei Zadi. Matthew 5, Yeshua goes see the multitude, he goes up to the mountain, sits down and says he opened his mouth. That's Pei Zadi. Well, the resurrection is a Pei Zadi. What mouth opened? The grave. The het, the enclosure, the tomb opens up. So anybody who thinks, well, did the dead rise from the dead? It's right there in the Hebrew alphabet. And so I don't know what other religions believe. There's so many Christian options and variations. I don't even know what they all believe. I know what I was taught. I know what I've heard. I know what I might think I understand, but whether anybody else agrees with that or that's in my own mind, I couldn't tell you. But what I'm saying is that I know some people believe that there is no resurrection of the dead. In fact, in the gospel it says that the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection, though the Pharisees did. But both the Pharisees and the Sadducees were you might say, the enemy oppositional forces to Yahusha's philosophy, theology, words of teaching, whatever you want to call them. So whether anybody else thinks there's a resurrection of the dead, it's talked about. Just Ezekiel 37 is enough. But you see, that's not all that happened. It's not like Yeshua resurrected from the dead and see ya, and took off into the sky. He hung around for 40 days. 40 days. And people can say, well, what does 40 mean? Yod is 10. So you got the first 10 letters in the alphabet, 1 through 10. And then Kaf is the 11th letter, but for whatever reason, it's reckoned, at least in modern times, with base 10. So Kaf is 20, Lamed's 30, Mem is 40, Nun is 50. Okay, well, he hung around for 40 days. That's Mem. What does that mean? Well, Mem is water. Some people say, oh, Mem is chaos. Mem is lines up with in the Mishkan pattern with the laver, which is where we get the word laboratory. It's a place of incubation. It's a place of messing with things, doing science, investigating. But the point is, why did he hang around for 40 days? What has that got to do with Mem? But then what did he do? He took off. He was on standing on the Mount of Olives, and the letter following Zadi is Kuf. Well, Kuf is this mushroom shape. It's our letter in English, Q. There's a circle and a straight line, kind of like a lollipop, right? Or a balloon. And he was standing there talking to his disciples when they said, hey, is it now you're going to restore the kingdom of Israel? Was that like as soon as he resurrected, or was that 40 days later? But there was this time after the resurrection where, because he just didn't disappear, well, he's hanging around. So we could say, well, that's just the story. That everything means something. Everything means something. The fact that he folded the napkin, or the angel folded it when he resurrected at the tomb. What is the word for folded cloth? It means something. Why 40 days? Well, Mem is 40, but what else does that mean? Why then did he rise up in the air? And then the disciples were going, what? They're standing there looking at him rise up. Well, see, that's the Kuf shape. So the fact that Kuf is after Zadi, and in this story we have the resurrection, 40 days later, Kuf, and then the angel said, he's coming back the same way. Well, so Kuf is not only to rise up, but it's also to come back. The word Jacob means to follow in the wake. It means there's something following. The letter Kuf in Yaakov spelled with the letter Q, not C. Anyway, that just gets into the language thing. But what I'm saying is, if him coming back to life and then hanging around for 40 days is its own story, its own message, it means something. If Israel's in dispersion, 2,730-year curse, locked down, confused, completely ignorant and blinded, that there is a future. But there is a future. Well, if he brings us back out of the dispersion, out of our ignorance and oppression by the overlords that Yahuwah had imposed on his people because they wouldn't listen to his voice. Okay, we'll come back, we'll listen to your voice. Open your mouth, blossom your Torah, which we do. That's not the end of the world. Because the picture of the 40 more days might be the millennial reign. 1,000. Well, is it 1,000 or is it 40? It's picture types.
Yeah.
So then you have in Daniel 2, remember Nebuchadnezzar, the great king of Babylon, was given a dream. Remember, he had a dream, he didn't know what it was, it disturbed him, and he called in all his wise men and magicians and sorcerers and said, tell me both the dream and its meaning. They'll say, come on, nobody can do that. You tell us the dream, and then we'll give you the interpretation. No. If you guys are worth your salt, if you're credible as being wise, sage, seers of the unknown, you're going to tell me both my dream and what it means, and I'll know whether you're telling me the truth or not, because I'll have an inner memory. And they all said, gosh, we're doomed. We can't do it. And somebody said, well, ask Daniel. He's this guy that's got some special connection. So Daniel was, okay, and Daniel got the answer, and he told the king, you were wondering, what's going to happen? What's going to happen after me? I've got this great kingdom, and who can conquer it? What's going to happen? I wonder how long planet Earth goes. And he had a vision. He saw this big statue, head of gold, arms of silver, midsection bronze, legs of iron, feet of iron mixed with clay. And Daniel gave, long story short, the interpretation that you, O king, are the head of gold, the great first preeminent kingdom. At least after the flood, but in a certain period of time, it's like, okay, after you comes Media Persia, the arms of silver, okay. Then Greece, okay, then Rome, the legs of iron, and then a period of, it's an extension of Rome, but feet mixed with clay. What's that? Well, my thinking is, that's almost like democracy. You know, there's not so many monarchies around, but there certainly is a bunch of democracies these days, or talk of democracy. Or maybe it has something to do with communism, socialism. It had to do with the people, like all the toes, and iron doesn't mix with clay. But in the days of those kings, it says, this stone is going to come out of, it says, hewn from a mountain, not by human hands. There's another way to read that that says, not by human armed conflict. So if not by human armed conflict, then it's not going to happen through a war. But nevertheless, the stone comes and hits or impacts the toes, and the statue topples and crushes and turns to dust and decomposes, and the wind blows it and no memory of it is around. But see, that's not the end of the world. That stone starts growing and developing. It's time, it's process. It's not instantly a big mountain. It grows and it fills the whole world, and it says its sovereignty will not be yielded to another kingdom. So it's the last kingdom. So this idea that the bad guys win and that the arch enemy of God, the devil's kingdom, the tribulation, that one world government rules until the end of the world, doesn't fit the pattern.
No.
Not the same story.
No.
So if we were to believe that there's a staging of misinformation, of lies, of an agenda, which just isn't true. Yahweh said he'd send a grand delusion, especially if we didn't love the truth.
That's right.
Well, then what might be the truth? Well, it's not going to be according to the teachings of the delusion. And if the truth has to do with Yahuwah's vote reigning preeminently supreme on the face of the earth, empowering his people, and that his people, their version of the truth will be recognized by everybody else, then every other doctrine, every other religion, every other government, of course, he did say there still will be kingdoms, so he's not going to take away the government control. He's going to allow people to still manage their cultures, their positions geographically on the face of the earth. But there's something ideologically, in terms of philosophy, religion, truth, reality, he will have, you might say, the scepter over. But that's all got to be in front of us then, which is a whole different consciousness for us to have, so as not to be despaired when we see, oh, they're going to change the money, they're going to change the way that the computers. Well, I'll tell you, man, what is it, about 30 years ago? There was no computers, there was no cell phones, and we did pretty well.
We did maybe better.
So it's not the end of the world if they blast the modern tech system, but to make use of the technology to say, hey, we can talk about these words and make videos, and people around the world might listen to this. Well, we'll see. But so where do you see this going in light of this? In light of when that statue falls, it's not the end of the world. No. That stone becomes a kingdom, kind of like when Yeshua rose from the dead. There's this picture of 40 years. They couldn't conquer him. He wasn't subject to their control anymore. He was now of a different sort. Right. So how does that play into this study?
Well, what you described it agrees perfectly with what we've been seeing here about a kingdom that is established by Yahuwah, that fills and influences the whole earth. In fact, in Matthew, Yeshua described the kingdom like leaven that leavens a whole lump. It permeates all those other kingdoms. It becomes the preeminent power on the earth. And in Ezekiel 40, speaking of 40 again, a detailed description is given of the temple, a temple that has never been built, a temple that I think we know more about this temple than any of the other temples that existed. There's so much detail here that an architect could lay out the plans. I mean, he tells how many steps there are leading up to the courts, the measurements, the layout. There's even detail that an interior decorator could take and decorate the walls. I mean, it's very complete. And at the end of that, he describes a stream flowing from the temple. And again, there's that picture of a growing theme, or of the leaven filling the whole lump, in that you see the water is very shallow. And the further out you go, the deeper it gets, and the deeper it gets until it becomes a great river, and that the trees that grow along the river are for the healing of the nations.
So it's not for the destruction of everybody on the face of the earth, it's a healing of the nations. So this picture, I've seen somebody did an illustration, Jesus and the devil arm wrestling. That's not an accurate picture. It's an interesting illustration of a certain type of thinking, but where do we get this idea that God and the devil are fighting each other? I just heard somebody talking about that. God and the devil have a battle going on right now for the hearts of men, or the souls of men. No, that's not what's going on. The God of the Bible, Yahuwah Zavot, is not fighting Satan, Lucifer, the devil. In fact, he says he exists supreme only. He's the maker, thus possessor, El Kona, of the heavens and the earth, and beside him there's no other. Certainly not across the table wrestling him with some kind of equal power base. It just doesn't exist.
In all these texts, he's in complete authority and complete charge. He brings it about when he wants it to be brought about, how he wants it to be brought about, and in the way he wants it to be brought about. He's in complete control of the whole thing.
Well, then where's the agency of evil? Where's the devil force in this thinking?
Well, of course, in the end, he abolishes it completely. He has control over the whole situation.
But is there any agency of devil power in this in this study that you're doing?
Yes, and as we go through this, and depending on how much time we have, you'll see that this kingdom is imperfect.
The kingdom of heaven that he's going to bring to the face of the earth.
A problem arises. Yes, we'll get to that. We might be jumping ahead a little at this
Jesus
point.
has an Achilles heel.
There's an issue. Yes,
really.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But and in Ezekiel 48, I think is important because it describes exactly the size and location of this kingdom when it begins. Literally, there are specific locations of towns from north to south and east to west. It describes where it begins, but then as the picture of the little stone describes, it grows and fills the whole earth. The leaven fills the whole lump. The water gets deeper and deeper. They're all pictures of this kingdom growing and filling the whole earth until it's the primary influence in all the world. Going on to Hosea, prophecies here that speak of, and then she will say, I will return to my first husband, for then was it better for me than now. This is Yahweh's people returning to Yahuwah. For she did not know that it was I who gave her the grain and the wine and the oil and multiplied unto her silver and gold. I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. He talks about pulling her away into a private place to judge her. I will give her vineyards in the valley of Achor for a door of hope. She will call me Ishi and no longer Baali, for I will take the names of the Baals out of her mouth. In that day I will make a covenant with the beasts of the field and the fowls of the air and the creeping thing, make them lie down safely. I will betroth you unto me forever in righteousness and justice and loving kindness and compassion and faithfulness. In Hosea 6, come, let us return to Yahuwah, for he has torn, but he will heal us. He is smitten, but he will bind us up. After 2 days he will revive us, and on the third day he will raise us up that we may live in his presence.
So now that's a model of the, again, going back to the fractal pattern of Israel being in the dispersion, overwhelmed by its enemies, being subjected to the overpowering of its enemies, but coming back to life, just like the picture of Yeshua resurrecting from the dead.
Yes.
But it says on the third day he will revive us. Well, Yeshua said in the grave 3 days and 3 nights.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it was Wednesday afternoon that he was killed, then it starts with the night. So Wednesday night, Thursday day, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday day.
Yes.
So he had to rise from the dead before it was night on Saturday. So after the day, so it would be that evening time on Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
which is when. So that says on the third day. But the interesting thing in Hebrew is that the prefix letter bet literally is the word. It's actually just one letter, but it literally refers to in, on, with,
Mm-hmm.
against,
Mm-hmm.
among, through, in the condition of.
Mm-hmm.
So sometime about the condition of, and if it was at the end of the third day, before it was nighttime, so he's like, okay, the third day is pretty well complete. That's like the 2,730 years, 1,000 years being a day. Well, that's getting close to the end of the 3,000. So it's like, well, where does the hours and days line up? But just this concept of, well, this seems to be about that time.
It does.
If this is the end of the 2,730 year curse of Leviticus 26
Mm-hmm.
with Ezekiel 4 and
Mm-hmm.
projecting it forward from 730
720.
721 BC. Sorry, my mind.
720,
Up to 2010.
Right.
Okay, so that throws us into this, which is a picture. Yeah, I'd say it's a fractal pattern, 3
Yes.
days and 3 nights. But
Yes.
but that doesn't mean Israel comes back to life and okay,
Right.
end of game, world's done, finished,
Oh,
end
no.
of humanity on life
Israel
of the
comes
earth.
back to life to fulfill its purpose.
To fulfill its purpose,
Purpose.
so that Yahuwah, when he says, I'll be your Elohim, and you're going to be my people, and boy, we're going to show those other people.
No,
It
this
has a
is-
purpose of blatant manifestation of his involvement with his people, because his people are fully engaged with his words. We
Yes.
haven't ever seen that.
No. And why does he do it? Because he loves the whole world. Every kindred, tongue, and people. All nations.
In the
That's
good of blessing,
over and over again.
the good of blessing the world through his people
Yes.
is to give his people regard. It's the same thing Yeshua said in the Garden of Gethsemane, that what they call the high priestly prayer. He says, Yeshua praying to his Father, he says, look, I have glorified you, so now you should glorify me, so that when the people give me regard, they're glorifying you,
You.
because I'm only
That's
pointing
right.
at you.
That's right.
He didn't absorb the glory for
No.
himself.
No.
It's the same
He's
with
the link.
Israel.
He's the
So
link.
for Yahweh Elohim to be the Elohim of his people, protect, defend, be their champion, and give them the wealth of the wicked that have been stored up, it's not for us to say, yeah, but point to him.
That's right.
And the people
That's
will
right.
give But the nations will give Yahweh's people regard, so they give regard to Elohim.
That's right.
It's the same system relay.
Yes.
But why haven't we been told about this?
It's all over the place. And again, I'm just picking chapters here, but Joel 4. And in that time, when I will bring back the captivity of Yehuda and Jerusalem, I will gather all nations and will bring them into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there for my people and for my heritage. Again, all nations, over and over again. His goal is to save the whole world.
And the only way to do that is to resurrect everybody like Yeshua resurrected and have them hang around on the face of the earth before just resurrecting and flying to the sky. It's
That's
like,
right.
what if what we were told is
That's right.
not the agenda? So the question is, if you look at the Hebrew alphabet as a map of eschatology, look at Yeshua's life as a map of eschatology. It's not just his story, it's a map of humanity on the face of the earth and a map of Israel being just as much this protagonist going through this gauntlet of events, this obstacle course, just like Yeshua. So then when people look at Isaiah 53 and they say, well, is that Yeshua or is that Israel? It's both.
That's right. It's both. It's both. Look at Micah 1 again. Hear you people, all of you. Hearken, O earth. Is he speaking to just a little remnant, a few people? He says, all of you, all people, all that are therein. The earth contains the graves, the DNA of every human being that's ever lived. All that are in the earth. And let Yahuwah be witness against you from his set-apart temple. For behold, Yahuwah comes forth out of his place, and will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. And the mountains will be molten under him, and the valleys will be cleft, as wax is before fire, as waters that are poured down on a steep place. Has that ever happened? He's calling to all the peoples of the earth. Hearken, hear my voice. Micah 2, I will surely assemble, O Yaakov, all of you. I will utterly gather the remnant of Israel. I will render them all as sheep in a fold, as flock in the midst of their pasture. They shall make their great noise by reason of the multitude of men. In Micah 4, he will judge between many people and will decide concerning mighty nations afar off. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation. When he speaks of nation, he's not talking about his people. He's talking about the nations of the earth. Neither shall they learn war anymore. The leaven is leavening the whole lump. The water is getting deeper. The stone is filling the whole earth. All these are all the same picture. In that day, says Yahuwah, I will assemble her that halts. I will gather her that is driven away. And her that I have afflicted. And I will make her that halted a remnant. And her that was cast off a mighty nation. And Yahuwah shall reign over them in Mount Zion. Unto you shall it come. Yes, the former dominion shall come. The kingdom of the daughter of Jerusalem. Has that ever happened?
You know, when it says the daughter of Yerushalayim, the word Yerushalayim, we talked about this at the last video on Ericology YouTube, it means to pay the promised reward, inheritance, indemnification of having an insurance policy. Your car gets smashed, hey, I've got insurance on that, and like they drag their feet. They finally pay you as was the policy declaration. And so you say, well, Yahweh said that he'd bring us back. He hasn't brought us back yet. We haven't been indemnified. He said, when you return to me with all your heart and all your soul, and listen to the words which I have instructed you to listen, guard the things I said to guard. Commandments, protocol, custom, Moedim, Shabbat. Then I will do everything I said. That hasn't happened because we haven't done our part yet.
That's right.
With the fact that we're talking about doing this and at least thinking about it, somebody doesn't have to believe this, and it's like, well, too bad. Would you rather believe the fear porn that's on the news and on the internet? Go ahead, believe whatever you want to believe. I choose to believe that when Yeshua rose from the dead, hung around for 40 days, and then took off and is coming back, that's part of a staged narrative. It's a message in and of itself that once he brings back the language, the concept that we are his people, It's a kingdom with a longevity
Yes.
in close association with him being our Elohim, blatantly clear to all the other people groups, nations, mindsets
Yes.
of the earth. Every other paradigm itself will fall when confronted with the blatant reality, the truth of this Brit Olam, this eternal covenant that Yahuwah has with Israel.
Perfect description of what you just said. Micah 5, and this is usually tied to a messianic prophecy, but it leads directly into a prophecy regarding his kingdom. But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, which are little to be among the thousands of Yehudah, out of you shall one come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, and whose going forth are from old, from ancient of days. Therefore will he give them up until the time that she who travails has brought forth. Then the residue of his brothers shall return with the children of Israel. That's all 12 tribes. And he shall stand and shall feed the flock in the strength of Yahuwah, in the majesty of the name of Yahuwah his Elohim, and they shall abide, and they shall be great unto the end of the earth. Again, the filling of the whole earth, the leaven, leavening the lump, the water getting deeper.
Well, one more matter you mentioned with the daughter of Jerusalem, and he uses Israel in metaphors of being a servant, metaphors of being a son, a daughter, a wife. But the interesting thing about the word daughter, which is bet tav, pronounced bat, it's not just a girl, a maiden, a daughter, but it means one deserving of. It's the picture of a village under the auspices of the you might say the civil government of a city. So the village doesn't have its own government, the city does, which it's under, to be like a chick under the wings of the mother hen. So one deserving of his being their Elohim is that we walk in his ways, listen to his voice, and do, as a worshipful servant, obed, ayin bet dalit, worship and servant and obedience is the word obed, like Obadiah.
Got it.
Which if we're not walking in his ways, listening to his voice, doing the instructions of his Torah, we're not deserving of his relationship as our Elohim. And in the book of Proverbs it says, whoever turns his ear from listening to the Torah, even so, which is a mere reciprocal image, your prayer is an abomination. So it's like, if we think we have a doctrine that says there is no Torah, it was all nailed to the cross and done away with, then according to the book of Proverbs, the way that I simply read it, he can't and won't hear our prayers. And yet the relationship coming is that not only does he hear our prayers, he's right there with provision of not only sustenance for life on the face of the earth, but also as a champion heroically of military defense. Well, he can't do that if we don't listen to his Torah, and if we're told there is no law but the law of love, and you don't have to do anything because it was nailed to the cross, and all that kind of falls under the category of false doctrine to me. It all depends on how you hear what he said.
Here in Habakkuk, we get into really one of the most difficult concepts of this kingdom, and it's dealing with death. It really would be a topic of its own, but I thought maybe I'd go through this kind of briefly. Habakkuk chapter 2. Yahuwah answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon the table that a man may read it quickly. It's an interesting instruction. For the vision is for the appointed time, and it declares of the end, and it does not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it. For surely it will come, it will not delay, but the righteous will live by faith. Now listen very carefully. He says, wine is a treacherous dealer. The haughty man abides it not. He who enlarges his desire as Sheol. What is Sheol?
You know the word for hell, or the likes of hell.
Yes. As it is his death, and it cannot be satisfied. In other words, this grave cannot be satisfied. It gathers unto it all nations, and it keeps unto it all peoples. In other words, we all go to the grave, all the nations. That is what death does. It gathers in everybody. Now listen, verse 6. He says, shall not all these, who? The dead? Take up a parable against him? Who? Death. And a taunting riddle against him, against death, and say, woe to him that increases that which is not his. In other words, the grave is claiming everybody, but Yahuwah is saying, no, they're not all yours. For how long? And that it lades himself with many pledges. Shall they not rise up suddenly that shall exact interest of you? In other words, he's saying, I can take back from the grave any that I want, and awake any that shall violently shake you. Shake what? Shake death, shake its grip, shake its power. And you shall be a booty to them, verse 8, because you, and I'm saying who? Death, have spoiled many nations. All the remnant of the people will spoil you, because of men's blood, and for the violence done to the land, to the city and all that dwell therein. Woe to him, and here I'm saying it's metaphorically death, that gains evil gains for his own house, the house of Sheol, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. Death will not be delivered or preserved, it will perish. Verse 10, you have devised shame to your house, speaking to Sheol, by cutting off, by death, many people, and have fortified your own. Death will be destroyed, in verse 11. For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber will answer it. Woe to him who builds a town. What town? I'm saying that town is a metaphor for Sheol, and they built it with blood. What establishes a city by iniquity? What city? The graves of the dead. Verse 14. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of Yahuwah, as the waters cover the sea. Eventually that water will get so deep that it will take in every person. All the graves will be opened, and everybody will be experience the knowledge and the glory of Yahuwah. He will recover everyone from the grave and give them the opportunity to know who he is. That's Habakkuk. And again, we could study that. That's just a very brief overview, but I believe right there he gives us a clear picture that he will resurrect every person and bring them into his kingdom, so that all the earth, every person, will be filled with knowledge and the glory of Yahuwah, as the waters cover the sea. Again, bringing back that image of waters or leaven.
So going back to what we said in the very beginning, the people that have said, I don't believe in God, I don't like religion, I don't like what I hear preachers and various other cultures and various other types of gods over the ages. The people have believed in, space alien gods and Greek and Roman gods and whatever, and it's like, has any of them had a chance, an opportunity to hear the truth about Yahuwah's Avot and his salvation, his Yahusha, and decide, do I want to be leagued with that king and kingdom or not? And if we've all just been given a bunch of lies, a bunch of fables, how can anybody have made a real decision? But some do. But what you're suggesting there is that the point of resurrecting the dead is so that they can then decide in full view of Yahweh's Avot whether they want to be
With knowledge.
That's right. His people or not his people.
That's right.
And what you're saying with John 3:16 is that he so loved this concept of human beings living on the face of the earth that he doesn't want to just say, well, you had the wrong gospel, burn in hell. Oh, you never heard about Jesus? Burn in hell. The missionary had an agenda, burn in hell. Only those who were fortunate enough to get the pure truth and then be predestined to respond to it, oh, okay, you get to come in and eat of the tree of life forever. But it's like, is that the loving God? Or is that why so many people choose not to believe in that God?
Absolutely. If they could see him as he is. He said he loves the whole world, every kindred, tongue, and people. If Yahuwah loves the whole world, then he must be a righteous judge. And a righteous judge can only judge someone based on their knowledge, the position that they're in. And so he gives everybody the opportunity to choose him based on knowledge. A righteous judge will never judge people and send them to hell for a decision they didn't even understand. So here we see that the purpose of this kingdom is to give every single person who has ever lived the opportunity to know who he is and what he's about and what his kingdom is about, and to see the contrast between his light and darkness, and to make a choice and then be judged. That is righteous, loving judgment. And I am absolutely convinced that this 150 chapters is speaking to exactly that we can trust Yahuwah, our Elohim, to be a righteous and loving judge who would never judge someone for making a decision that they didn't understand.
You want to check the time here? Let me just say this while you're doing that to make sure we don't run out of the... I've heard people say that they reject the religion of the Bible, the religion of the church, the God of the Bible. Well, wait a minute. If they're being presented a false understanding, are they wrong for rejecting it? They're actually doing right by rejecting it. The question is, what's the true understanding? What I have found is that, this is the Old Testament, it's called Tanakh in Hebrew, and what I have found in my own personal mind and study is that for 50 years in the Christian church of various different denominations, and talking to numerous friends, Catholic, Mormon, JW, SDA, Orthodox, it's a different voice than what's in here. And my reason for studying Paleo-Hebrew is to understand this voice, which I believe is the voice of not the Jewish rabbis, but the voice of Yahweh's Avot. And I find myself rejecting the different voices that I've heard represent mainstream at large the last 2,000 years of a billion permutations of Christianity. And I've found that I've had to reject those voices in light of this voice. And therefore, I can't look at any other person who has rejected those voices and say, well, you're obviously a heathen pagan, you're going to burn in hell because you're wrong. If they're doing right by rejecting those voices, if those voices are the delusion contrary to the voice of Yahuwah's Avot. Right. So I'm not defaming Jesus Christ. I am validating Yahuwah's Avot and his voice on the face of the earth, Yahusha HaMashiach. I absolutely validate him.
Absolutely.
But not a distortion, delusion, a modification, a permutation of these words. And if I find any discrepancy between what's presented in our modern culture versus what these words say, then I have to say, I have to distance myself from them, so I can't say, oh yes, I'm a Christian, because if the word Christian represents any of those voices which contradict this, then I can't, with any sense of, oh yeah, but I have such affinity with that word. It's not about the word, it's about the ideology, it's about the voice. So if I have to align with this voice, I have to disalign, distance myself from alternative interpretations.
So we're at about 40 minutes. So I would suggest why don't we do a break, and then we'll I think we can wrap this introduction up in another 40-minute segment. So
great.